As Texans fans, I think it's really important for us to keep up with our divisional opponents, especially now, considering our division is considered up and coming. So it's important to look at the moves they've made in the offseason and why they made them, if the move makes sense or not, all that other stuff. So, if you're a Texans fan, you already know the grade I gave the Texans for their draft. It was a C+. And if you're a Titans, Jaguars, or Colts fan, well, now you know I gave them a C+. I'm not going to talk about the Texans. This is about the Jaguars, Titans, and Colts. So, we're going to start off with the Titans because the Titans had a pretty small, or a really small, draft haul. They only brought in 4 new players through the draft. And with their first round pick, the Titans selected Rashaan Evans, linebacker out of Alabama. Now, you guys know how I feel about Alabama players. There's only a few that really succeed in the league. A bunch of them are busts, like Eddie Lacy, Trent Richardson, and a bunch other more. There's only a few that actually accomplish something in the league. And Rashaan Evans, I think he'll be one of them. Now, I'm not saying this guy is going to be as good as Luke Kuechly. I think he'll be a decent starter for the Titans for a solid 8 to 12 years. He's just a solid all-around guy. The move makes perfect sense because the Titans really lacked in the linebacker position, especially coverage-wise last season. And I think Rashaan Evans comes in here day one and starts day one. So I think it was a really good pick for them. They did trade up a bit. I didn't really think they had to, but there was rumors that the Patriots were going to take him. So, I guess it's kind of justified, but I do give this pick an A+. And with their second round pick, the Titans selected Harold Landry, edge rusher. And I give this pick an A. This guy had a first round grade. The Titans were really considering taking him with their first round pick, and they got him with the second. Now, they did give up a third rounder to move up, which I'm not really convinced that was a good prize, but they did get a guy that had a first round grade on him. Now, Harold Landry, I don't really see him starting day one. I don't see him starting over Orakpo or Morgan. I see him being more of a situational pass rusher, and then maybe next year he comes in as a starter. He does have some few flaws in his game, but I do think he can, work with it and eventually become a solid starter for them for a few years. His only weakness is the fact that he's a little bit weaker, so with an NFL strength and conditioning program, he should be able to easily, get stronger and be able to take on NFL players. The Titans didn't have another selection until the 5th round, where they selected safety Dane Cruikshank out of Arizona. Now, as someone who's a fan of a team that needed a lot of defensive back help, I scouted quite a lot of defensive backs. Dane Cruikshank was one of them. And I'm going to tell you right now, this guy is not good. He is a special teamer at best. He has no business being a starter in the NFL. He has issues all over his coverage game, zone coverage, man coverage. He can't do any of that. He's just a straight up run stopping safety. I think he could have easily taken a guy similar to him or with even better skill sets later on in the draft. He probably could have gotten a better undrafted free agent than Dane Cruikshank. I don't think this guy is really all that good, but maybe they were intending him to be a special teamer, but in the 5th round, you're kind of not looking for special teamers. You're kind of looking for those situational players, if you get what I'm saying. Like a situational edge rusher, or a third down back, or something like that. I just think it was a pretty bad pick by the Titans. I give this pick a C. And with their final pick in the 6th round, the Titans selected Luke Falk, quarterback. Now again, the Texans needed a backup quarterback, so I scouted quite a lot of backup quarterbacks. Luke Falk happens to be one of them. This guy is not good either. I mean, if you want a realistic NFL comparison, picture a skinnier Tom Savage. And there you have it. Not even playing. His arm is probably not as strong as Savage, but he is accurate. He's pretty much paranoid in the pocket. Doesn't release the ball. He just holds on to it. It just wasn't a good pick. I'm giving this pick a C just because he is a backup quarterback. I mean, you can't really expect much out of a backup. So, yeah. So overall, I'm giving the Titans a B grade on their entire draft. I think they did pretty decent. Like, the first 2 picks were really good picks. Should be starters for them for years to come. The next 2 picks, I don't see them being in the league for long, honestly. So, a B grade, which is higher than the Texans. I mean, they did have 2 first-round picks. We didn't, so. Or, essentially 2 first-round picks, because in the 2nd round they picked a guy that should have been a first-rounder, so. Yeah. And the next team we're going to be looking at is the Jaguars. With their first pick, the Jaguars selected Taven Bryan, defensive lineman out of Florida. Now, I'm giving this pick a B plus because I think there was way better players on the board that the Jaguars really could have benefited out of, like right off the bat. A guy like Josh Jackson, a guy like Isaiah Oliver that can replace Aaron Colvin as the nickel corner, because these days in the NFL, nickel corners are, out there for over 60% of the plays. So a nickel corner is a starter in the NFL these days. So they could have gone there. They could have gone with Lamar Jackson, which would have been a huge upgrade over their quarterback, Blake Bortles, in my opinion, because Blake Bortles is a bad quarterback. Or they could have gone a wide receiver. But they opted to go with Taven Bryan. Taven Bryan isn't a bad player by any means. I think he's a good player. But their defensive line is stacked. I don't see him starting this season. Might not even start next season either. But I mean, it was pretty smart for them to, kind of pick a player in a position that they're going to be kind of thin at in the future due to cap casualties, because they are going to have to make some roster cuts soon, because next year they have, I want to say, they're like 20 mil over the cap, so they do have to make some moves, and I'm pretty sure some of those defensive linemen are going to go, so it's kind of smart for them to take Taven Bryan. But the Jaguars are kind of going all in on the roster they have now, which I completely disagree with. I do think they have quite a lot of holes to fill, and they could have benefited from using that 1st round pick on something else that really would have helped them out. So again, B plus, not a bad player, just think they could have done something better. And in the 2nd round, the Jaguars selected DJ Chark, wide receiver out of LSU. Now I'm giving this pick an A for obvious reason. The Jaguars, they don't have receivers, so they really needed a receiver. DJ Chark, I think he was a top 5 receiver in the draft, the fastest wide receiver in the draft. So, to me, I think it's a pretty good pick. I think he should be their number 2 receiver opposite Marquise Lee. And I don't think the Jaguars have that talented of a receiving core. It's just pretty much a bunch of slot receivers, honestly. So I do give this pick an A. I think it was a pretty good pick. Now in the 3rd round, the Jaguars selected Ronnie Harrison, safety out of Alabama. I give this pick an A+. This was a phenomenal pick by the Jaguars. This was probably my favorite pick of their entire draft. Now, like the Texans in the 3rd round they selected Justin Reed, the safety out of Stanford. That guy was considered a first round to early second pick, and the Texans got him in the 3rd round. Justin Reed was the 3rd best safety in the draft. Now, Ronnie Harrison, by many, he was considered the 4th best safety in the draft. The Jaguars picked him up in the 3rd round. I think it was an absolute steal. I think this guy could be a day 1 starter, but I don't think he will be a day 1 starter. Again, this was a good pick by the Jaguars. I think down the line, if Barry Church becomes a cap casualty, I do think Ronnie Harrison can easily go in there and start in place of him. Might even be better than him. And in the 4th round, the Jaguars selected Will Richardson, offensive tackle out of NC State. I'm giving this pick an A. Now, as a person that's a fan of a team that needs offensive tackle help, I did scout Will Richardson. Now, Will Richardson, I do think he will be a solid player in the league. I'm not saying he's going to be Lane Johnson. I'm not saying he's going to be that. But I think he will be a solid player in the league. I think he'll make a fine right tackle for the Jaguars, for the next 10 years. I see a few flaws in his game, his passing game. He does need to get that footwork worked out. I do think he could get a little sloppy sometimes. His handwork can also get a little sloppy, and he does have off-the-field issues. So, if he can, work on that, I think he could be a good starter for the Jaguars for, a good 8-10 years. Pretty good pick. Give it an A. In the 6th round, the Jaguars selected Tanner Lee, quarterback. Yeah. This guy is terrible. Really bad. He's a poor man's Blake Bortles. I mean, literally. There's nothing about this guy that is good. This guy was literally projected to go undrafted, like not even be in the league. That's how bad he is. I'm giving this pick an F. This is probably like the only bad pick the Jaguars had. Actually, in fact, this is the only bad pick the Jaguars had. And the 7th round, the Jaguars selected Leon Jacobs, linebacker out of Wisconsin. I'm giving this pick an A. I think this guy can be a good situational pass rusher for them, and he can be, at some point down the line, a starting linebacker for them, because they do run a 4-3, and they lost Paul Pasquale to retirement, so they kind of do need someone there. So I think this guy is a good value pick. You could use him in many multiple ways. He's versatile. I think it was a good pick. And with their last 7th round pick, their last pick in the draft, the Jaguars selected Logan Cook, punter out of Mississippi State. I'm giving this pick an A because I like punters. I mean, he's a punter. I mean, there's nothing special about him. He's just a punter. But I think punters are funny, so I'm giving it an A. And their overall grade, I'm going to go ahead and give the Jaguars a B+. So far, I think the Jaguars have had the best draft out of the 3 teams we've currently gone over: the Texans, the Titans, and the Jaguars. And now, for the last team, the Colts. Now, the Colts had the most picks out of anyone in the division, so theoretically, they should have the best draft out of anyone. Anyways, with their 1st round pick, the 6th overall pick, the Colts selected guard Quentin Nelson out of Notre Dame. This is a straight up A+. Quentin Nelson was arguably the best player in the draft. This guy is a monster. This is a guy who can single-handedly take on players like Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh. This guy is regarded as a guard that is better than Zach Martin. And Zach Martin is arguably the best guard currently in the NFL. So that's pretty crazy, dude. If you watch this guy play, he's an absolute monster, and the Colts got a steal with Quentin Nelson here. The Colts, with their first of 4 second-round picks, selected Darius Leonard, linebacker out of South Carolina State. See, the Colts could have easily gained ground in the AFC South But after that Quentin Nelson pick, the rest of the draft was pretty lackluster. Darius Leonard, although I do like him, there was way better players on the board than Leonard. Yes, I know the Colts need a linebacker, but Leonard, you probably could have taken him with your last second round pick. Now Leonard, to me, he's just a poor man's Bernard McKinney. He can't cover, and he's not that good of as good as a run stopper as McKinney. So I'm giving this pick a B. There was a lot of better players on the board. This does fill a need. That's why it's a B. So yeah, let's move on. With their second round pick, the Colts selected Braden Smith, guard out of Auburn. Now, Braden Smith, a top 5 guard in the draft in my opinion. I'll probably even put him over Will Hernandez. This was a good pick for the Colts. It does help them protect the quarterback, whoever they're going to have back there in the future, because Andrew Luck is done. I don't think Jacoby Brissett's the answer either, so it will help them. But the reason why this pick is a B plus and not an A is because they obviously got Quentin Nelson to be one guard, and then they have Jack Mewhort as their other guard, and they brought in Matt Slauson as another guard. So they kind of have a bunch of guards kind of out there. So I don't know if Braden Smith will be a day one starter. I think he could be, but I think Jack Mewhort is a really underrated player in the league. Jack Mewhort just needs to stay healthy. So I do like the Braden Smith pick. B plus. And with their second round pick, the Colts selected Kimoko Ture, edge rusher out of Rutgers. I'm giving this pick a B. I think they reached for him. They did need some edge rusher help. But again, it falls under the same thing as Darius Leonard. I think they could have picked up a better edge rusher than Ture with one of their other second round picks, like the one they used for Leonard. They could have picked Harold Landry, but they decided to wait, and they picked Ture, who I don't think is a day one starter. I don't think he's really all that good. I just see him being a situational pass rusher for like his whole career. And again, if you're using a second rounder on a guy that's a situational player, you're kind of doing it wrong. I mean, you just got Jabal Sheard and John Simon last season in free agency. Yes, John Simon is injury prone, but still, you know, not a wise choice of a pick in my opinion. They could have gone somewhere else. And with their last second round pick, the Colts selected Tyquan Lewis, defensive lineman out of Ohio State. This pick is a B again. Another position of need, but I just don't think he's that good of a player. I'm not even sure he'll start day one, and that says a lot considering the Colts don't have that good of a defensive line. But if you can see a theme occurring right now with the Colts, like their draft is a bunch of reaches after Quentin Nelson. They're usually a bunch of reaches, and they're players that aren't really all that spectacular. They could have really used these 4th round picks to gain ground on the rest of the AFC South, but half of these picks are pretty lackluster. And in the 3rd round, the Colts selected Nyheim Hines, running back out of NC State. This is a C. This guy is a small running back, kind of like Tyler Ervin if you're a Texans fan. He's just not that good of a pick. I mean, you don't have the starting running back. You could have gone for a player that could be a starting running back in the NFL, but instead you go for a straight up 3rd down back. Yeah, I don't know what the Colts are doing. The Colts didn't have a 4th round pick, so in the 5th round, the Colts selected Darius Fountain, wide receiver out of Northern Iowa. This pick is a D. This guy might not even make the team, but he probably will because the Colts do need a lot of help at the wide receiver position. It's just Not a good pick. This guy has a lot of flaws in his game. He has hand issues. He has route running issues. He has a bad release. Yeah, I don't see him making the team. Now, in the 6th round, the Colts selected Deon Cain, wide receiver, out of Clemson. Colts, that was a good pick. I think this was a steal. This guy should have gone way sooner than he went. He should have been like a 3rd rounder, maybe even a late 2nd rounder. This is a straight up A+. This guy is pretty solid all around. I mean, nothing about him really sticks out, but I do think he's going to be a good player in the NFL because he doesn't do anything bad, but he doesn't do anything great. He's going to be a solid starter. I do think this guy could be their number 2 receiver right off the bat. And in the 7th round, the Colts had 2 picks. With the first 7th round pick, they selected Matthew Adams, a linebacker out of Houston. I'm giving that one an F. This guy is not good. Not even sure if he can even make the team as a special teamer. And with their second 7th round pick, they selected Zaire Franklin, linebacker out of Syracuse. The same thing I just said about Matthew Adams, the same thing can be applied to Zaire Franklin. Now, the Colts, man, could have really gained ground with this draft, but they kind of ruined it. I only see 3 picks that I really, really like, and that's Deon Cain, Quentin Nelson, and Braden Smith. Other than that, the rest of the draft is lackluster. At least half of these guys won't be in the league that long. Overall, I give the Colts a C on their draft. I mean, different GM, same result. Seriously. This new GM they have, Chris Ballard, is doing the same thing that Ryan Grigson was doing, and that's pretty much drafting a bunch of players at the same position in one draft class and hoping it would work. Like, it seems like the guy didn't even scout anyone. He just, pulled up a list out of players of the position they needed and just picked some. Seriously, like, this is a pretty bad draft by the Colts. Quentin Nelson, great pick. Braden Smith, great pick. Deon Cain, great pick. They had some decent picks there, but yeah, all around, I think the Colts had the worst draft class out of the 4 AFC South teams. I think the Texans, Jaguars, and Titans all kind of pulled further away from the Colts with this draft. I really do. So, anyways, with that being said, comment down below your opinion on the AFC South team draft class, and if you think I graded your team unfairly, comment down below why you think so. And yeah, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace.